Recording in progress.
Dr. Eve, if you are ready, we can start. If you can turn on your camera, we can start the session.
Thank you.
Dr. E, we still can't see you.
Apologies, my camera is out of actions.
Okay.
I will share my screen instead.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
We can see your slide.
That's great.
Okay. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed faculties and distinguished guests. Welcome back to AIB Auditorium for our second keynote speech in the ICCTASS 2025. This is going to be a hybrid session focused on a very crucial topic: financing the future sustainable infrastructure at crossroads of economics, ethics, and innovation. To steer this session, it is my honor to introduce our session chair, Dr. Faria Sultana, Associate Professor in the Department of Economics at American International University, Bangladesh. And now it is a true privilege to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker. Joining us virtually is Professor Dr. Zhen, who is a chair professor at Xiamen University's School of Economics, also an associate professor at Bartlett University College, London. Professor Ye's research integrates data-driven methods with infrastructure finance, alternative investments, machine learning, and operations research. Professor Ye's career spans senior academic appointments and professional roles in private equity, risk management, and higher education leadership. His current work focuses on capital markets, infrastructure investment, and risk modeling, with the aim of supporting strategic decision-making and strengthening global economic resilience. Professor Ye's profound work in this area promises to offer vital insights into how we can sustainably finance our future. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Professor Dr. Zhen Ye. I request Dr. Sultana to take over the charge of the session, and let's have a wonderful time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me the floor. For the audience and for my keynote speaker, this is Dr. Faria Sultana. I am an associate professor in the Department of Economics and also heading the department at AIUB right now. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker. I do share a personal bond with him because he has been my instructor. He has been my course instructor in one of the courses, which is related to infrastructure, economic, and sustainability. It's a wonderful pleasure and quite a proud moment for me to see a professor to come and be part of it. It would have been nice if he would have joined us in person, but maybe next time I might see him joining us at AIB, Professor. So I'll give the floor to Professor Zhen. Before that, the topic that our keynote speaker has chosen for today is financing the future sustainable infrastructure at the crossroads of economics, ethics, and innovation. It is a very apt title depending on what we are looking for, the sustainable development procedure or the sustainable development framework, where there is a crossroad definitely of ethics, innovation, and economic development. To start with, we will listen to him in a minute, but from my side, I'd like to say that the tone of the keynote speech would be the sustainable infrastructure, which sits at the intersection of moral responsibility, economic necessity, and technological possibility. So these keywords we'd like to intertwine to have a better sustainable economic development, keeping ethics and the integrity of the development in place. So with those few words, the session is all yours, Professor Zhen. Unfortunately, Professor's video is not working, so we won't be able to see his face, but we will be able to hear him. Professor, the session is all yours. You can see your slide, the first slide, and I hope you'll take it from here. You have around 15 to 20 minutes, and then after that, we'll have an open floor for question and answer. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Sultana. It's my great pleasure to reconnect with Dr. Sultana. As Sultana mentions, I was at Xiamen University in 2007 and 2009, and had the great fortune of sharing my courses with many international students from around the world. And Dr. Sultana is one of these students who join us in Xiamen. I'm currently at University College London, where I focus on infrastructure, economic, and finance. So as an economist at the Bartlett School of Sustainable Construction, part of the Bartlett Faculty of Built Environment. So one of the strengths of UCL is doing a lot of research, multidisciplinary research. So my work kind of as an economist sit in the Faculty of Built Environment is to look at the intersection between economic, particularly applied economic, financial analysis, and how this applies to a specific domain, which is infrastructure. So we are at a time where globally we are looking at trends such as deglobalization, decarbonization, and also within all this happening, a huge interest in terms of financing for infrastructure and financing for development. Infrastructure drives global environmental, social, and economic value. So about 70% of global greenhouse emission actually come from infrastructure. So for much part of the developed world, this is about climate adaptation. But for many developing countries, this is about how to build sustainable energy system that's green, and also disaster mitigation infrastructure that can kind of weaken the impact on the environment. So I think of particular importance to Bangladesh is to build resilient infrastructure that can mitigate, for example, the impact of climate change as a result of, for example, flooding, other natural disasters. So globally, there is a huge shortage, about 7 trillion per year, for investing in infrastructure. So this is challenge not just for developing country, but also for much part of the developed world. So I'm in London. So London's transport infrastructure, such as London Underground, has been over 160 years old. So this requires continuous update, but also to make it in line with the new laws and regulation. So for example, in 2004, 2005, the Labour government at that time in the UK legislated a new law which require all infrastructure and also institution to be kind of accessible. So for people with a disability, for people who have special needs, all the institution and transportation would require to be accessible for those particular users. So all this legal and new change in law means that a lot of existing infrastructure needs to be adaptable. And now we are also looking at adaptability of infrastructure towards climate change, which is a particular important topic. So taking my hometown, Xiamen University, where I still teach there every year, we have a huge problem with inflooding. So whenever Xiamen is an island in southeast China, is a coastal defense. The embankment has increased about, I would say, 1 to 2 meters just to act as a coastal defense. Meanwhile, we have a lot of issue, for example, with inflooding. Whenever we have spring tide, the seawater came into the tunnel and then this causes inflooding in infrastructure. How does this kind of infrastructure, climate resilient infrastructure finance is a particular challenge? So here we are talking about financing gap for infrastructure. Infrastructure has very long investment horizon. So, when we are looking at infrastructure, typically we are talking about pre-financial close, which is the period leading to the every party agreeing on financial terms, to commercial close, which is when all the party in the infrastructure project signed on the dotted line to start the project. Typically, from that onward, we have between 3 to 5 years of construction period, and then we have maintenance period. For the particular type of infrastructure, which is public-private partnership, this will require government to give concessions, and concession could be 10, 20, or 30 years. Again, taking an example of a bridge in my hometown, Xiamen, we have a bridge which connects the island to the mainland part of the city, and that bridge was initially financed by the World Bank. Over a period of 20 years, and it was initially toll-based, so all the traffic passing the bridges would require to pay a toll. Then after around 15 years, because of economic developments, Xiamen has enough fiscal revenue to repay the party which financed the bridge, which then actually the government take back the control by paying back the investors. So the bridge is now toll-free. So that's roughly 20, 30 years kind of timeline when we are looking at a particular bridge. During that period, a lot of things can happen. There are increasing regulatory uncertainty. If economic development takes place, and there shouldn't be any issues, the debt can be repaid. Typically, we are talking about between 1.5 to 4 times the debt repayment for this kind of finance, and very high upfront costs for financing bridge or other kind of infrastructure. Initially, this might require multilateral development institution to step in. So taking the example of bridge in Xiamen, this was initially financed by World Bank, and that was nearly 20, 30 years ago. Now there are, for example, AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. They finance a lot of Asia-based infrastructure projects, and a lot of this are issued in the form of bond. This kind of bond will then kind of finance for the project, and because it is geared towards sustainability and also green development, so some of this bond could have a lower cost of capital, which is very important for financing infrastructure projects. Given all sort of uncertainties such as currency fluctuations, political instability, these can also be guaranteed by MIGA, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, part of World Bank, against country risk. So these are the kind of broader background for financing infrastructure, and I will then kind of introduce the existing form of infrastructure finance together with a few more kind of innovative financing mechanisms, and as well as some sort of overall trend. So financing model has evolved from what is known as P to R. So P is traditionally public finance, which is state procurement of a road or kind of consortium bidding for a particular infrastructure project. Of course, most countries, these are huge drag on public deficit, on public finance. So in the UK, for example, they've been using private finance and project finance, particularly PPP, which stands for public-private partnership. And I will go into detail to introduce PPP and where does PPP has evolved. Since last 6 or 7 years from now, there is no more PPP project in the UK, despite its decline in the UK globally is taking place. And there are also new type of financing such as green finance. I briefly touch on that in terms of cost of capital, but there are also regulated asset base, as well as REITs, real estate investment trust. Despite its name, it is still one form of financing because all the first 5 types of financing is very much debt finance, whereas the last one, which I'm doing quite a bit of research over the past few years, is focusing on equity side. And I'll be using the example of Singapore. So public finance, here you have, this is the public debt issued by the Chinese government. This is really long time, 1910s, 1920s, for railway finance. And this bond is then kind of issued in London, and it was financed for the construction of railway. And so the first one was from Qing dynasties, where over kind of a few hundred years. And the second one is more recent. So this is undertaken by a syndicate of bank in the West. So as I mentioned, PPP is since 2017 is on the decline in the UK. The current government hasn't really kind of updated, but it has done is huge work in terms of building many hospitals, building schools, building infrastructure in the UK. So this is peak in 2004 and then gradually declining. The last one I think was Coventry Hospital, and I think that was probably one of the very few tell of the PFI, Private Finance Initiative. Now, the PFI, or public-private partnership, is usually financed by a consortium of construction company, equity sponsor, which could include the multilateral development agency, also the government. It also has construction company, as EPC contractors, as well as operation and maintenance company. Now, the arrangement for PPP is for each party to take on risk, so that risk is actually allocated within the consortium environment. And then the financier will then kind of cover the debt payment from the future cash flow. So we are typically talking about a few years in construction and then maybe 10, 20 years of the operation and maintenance, where the cash flow will run down or amortize towards the end. And then this project can hand it back to the public ownership, or it could be another contract, or it could be various combination of whether this is BOT, build, operate, transfer, or design, build, operate, and transfer, or build, operate, and transfer. Various combination in terms of contractual form. So the idea is that PPP is not cheap. Usually, it will be more expensive, but the advantages is it's supposed to price in also the risk because of the long horizon of infrastructure project. So those risk factors also go by the party best able to manage it. For example, construction company will manage the construction risk. Operation and maintenance company, they will deal with operation and maintenance issue. And then the public authority will also provide public services through this consortium. And globally, there are many projects being built using PPP. So despite its decline, globally is actually quite popular. And so in University College London, I teach a program called Infrastructure Using SPV, but also risk modeling and asset management. So the second picture that you see in the slide is what we call regulated assets. So this is particularly relevant for Bangladesh, because I know there's a huge river ecosystem in Bangladesh. So the what you see here is Thames barrier. These are few infrastructure mega project at the mouth of Thames to stop the tidal impact. And this is financed through regulated asset base, whereas the cost or part of the cost for building this infrastructure is charged in the form of levy in the water bill. of the utility company. And this is also an alternative form of financing, and quite successful. As you can see, it would have the resilience as a coastal defense mechanism against the flooding the sea. And Thames, of course, is a very long. It takes all the way somewhere between Oxford to London. And the majority stretch of this part of the river is very important to the prosperity of London and the Southeast region. The third and fourth form of infrastructure is risk. I spent last few years working with students from Singapore, Indonesia, some from Japan, from China, looking at alternative emerging form of financing from infrastructure, particularly the brownfield assets. And so this is Singaporean risk. As most of you know, Singapore is a very small country. It has all the infrastructure already built. So what it does is it start to invest into infrastructure in Southeast Asia, South Asia, developed part of the Western world, UK, US, using Singapore Stock Exchange as a funding mechanism. So here you can see this diagram with many different type of risks. And what we did is we separate the infrastructure from non-infrastructure risk. And as you can see, the performance of infrastructure has been exceptionally good over the COVID period. The pink line that you saw at the lower half of this diagram is Singapore's straight index. But most infrastructure assets financing through risk, despite its name, is actually a financing mechanism through stock exchange, through equity financing, has overperformed the straight index. So we are also currently looking at China, and a paper is forthcoming. So China innovate by initially listing 9 infrastructure risks since June 2021. Now there are 76 risks in China, about 80% of which are all infrastructure, using Shanghai and Hong Kong as a Shanghai and Shenzhen Stock Exchange. So this is still small compared with Singapore and Japan. This 2 region is largest in Asia. So tapping into this regional market, so increasingly we will see the infrastructure financed by equity rather than debt. But of course, this does require some level of development in the capital market. So as you can see in this slide, infrastructure return has been on average around 7 or 8%, which is quite reasonable from investors' perspective, particularly those who wanted to invest in infrastructure as a stable asset class. And this is very important because institutions such as insurance company, they need to look into match maturity or the future liability. So stock market is always going up and down. But if you invest in infrastructure project, you can match that duration, which is long duration, with the kind of liability for payback in the future. So that is why there is a lot going on in the research on infrastructure, particularly looking at how it can be financed for match kind of duality by institution. And institutional holding is also help to some extent stabilize the volatility in the capital market. So I will then introduce what is sustainable infrastructure. So when we talk about infrastructure, we usually talk about economic infrastructure, which are transport, energy, water, waste, communication, but also social infrastructure. So healthcare, education, cultural facilities, sports facility. So these are now all considered part of infrastructure family. Particularly important for developments are the hotspots of infrastructure. Crucial infrastructure such as energy, transport, and water are indispensable for development. And so is new infrastructure, such as data warehouse or the big data center, the data storage center. because they are increasingly part of the digitalized infrastructure, which is important for development, because globally we are also seeing a huge digital divide. So innovation is also happening in terms of green financing, green municipal, green project bond, and green risks and derivative. So I'm very happy to share the paper we have done in this with Dr. Sultana, so that if you are interested to engage with Bangladeshi academics and policymakers in terms of understanding how this mechanism works. I also mentioned that ethics is a very important part of infrastructure. We can build a lot of infrastructure based on what has already been built, particularly in the traditional economic sector. But we need to look at the future infrastructure, such as accessibility as a human right. So I previously mentioned 2004, 2005, the Accessibility, the Disability Act in the UK, as a legal instrument to transform the accessibility and making it as a law to impact on the all aspect of infrastructure which is required to be accessible. There's also social sustainability because population demographic is changing all the time, as well as dual purpose infrastructure. So I remember one of the Indian professor who came to do a talk in the research center. He talked about use of tunnel as a dual purpose infrastructure. So the tunnel could be used as a transport infrastructure at a time of a high flooding seasons or high raining season. It can be used as a drainage, and so it's using a lot of greenery as providing absorption capacity at a time. So when we look at infrastructure, we need to have creativity. So accessibility as well as integrated transport system, accessibility as part of kind of facility for disabled users, and what you see here is also a car converted into a boat. So it's dual use in that sense, as well as the green space as part of the absorption or using nature as a solution. So I will touch on the digitalization and AI. For AI, we have a lot of AI is now used for climate risk modeling. So weather system, weather forecasting typically has millions lines of code using various sensor systems, but also using automated ESG verification. Now, increasingly, we will see IoT, Internet of Things, enable monitoring and sensor system and use of AI as part of predictive maintenance. So technology infrastructure is going to be increasingly important. So in summer this year, I went to Beijing, and so I look at one region in Beijing where they start to design autonomous driving. So autonomous driving is basically using artificial intelligence, particularly the core component of artificial intelligence called machine learning, as a way to enable autonomous driving. But this is just a very small part of the picture. A large part of this is enabling infrastructure, such as radar in civilian use, but also the traffic light system, which would have to interact with autonomous vehicle. So all this is actually a system design infrastructure, not just autonomous driving, and it requires the integration of Internet of Things, IoT, sensor technology, radar, algorithm, and a huge amount of big data. So we done a paper in 2023, which is again looking at how this kind of algorithm data are used in infrastructure. And we look at particular class of algorithm for spatial temporal optimization from the point of view of distribution. This requires, a lot of multi-objective optimization expected to take place.
We're running out of time.
Yeah, sure. I will be wrapping up. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So globally, I think the crucial issue now is the climate change. So as you can see, this diagram is changing. One of the students from Tsinghua helped me to do this. Is we are seeing huge amount of emission per capita. So when we think about future infrastructure design, we need to look at how does those infrastructure can mitigate the impact of climate change. And for countries in South Asia, this is particularly important. So monsoon season, looking at river system that can create floodings. All these are very important when we design the future infrastructure. So emission side of design in infrastructure is also an opportunity for developing country to leverage its negotiating power in the future, because these are countries that doesn't emit as much as, for example, USA or China, which in aggregate in a huge amount due to the population in the country. So I think I'll leave this for some discussion if there is any time for it. So I think to wrap up, I think what we need is equitable, accessible, technology-enabled infrastructure that is financially resilient using various modes of financing, but also climate friendly. So with that, I end my presentation. Sorry, I'm overrunning it a little bit.
Thank you, Professor.
So these are my contacts. If you're interested, feel free to contact me. I'm very happy to exchange insight with the academics. And of course, we welcome students from Bangladesh to join our infrastructure investment and finance program at Bartlett, which is one of the programs that I have working in the last 5 or 6 years. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you so much. We can have a round of applause for Professor Zhen. Professor, just to summarize what the takeaways from his point of view on sustainable infrastructure leading to sustainable development. I think what we have taken from your abstract, or what is I understand, is that traditional funding models that we have seen for global development is not delivering what we are looking for as a scale of transformation. As you've mentioned, the new generation funding mechanisms for better infrastructure development is the key to go forward. And the risk is not that we innovate too fast. The thing is, the innovation has to have a purpose. The innovation, if it's just for the sake of innovation, would not lead us to the sustainable development result that we are looking for. So the purpose needs to be set correctly with ethics and creativity. That leads to the sustainable infrastructure development, leading to sustainable economic development. Some financial tools you've talked about, and what we can in future research, I think we can think about, is how from green bonds to AI-driven climate analytics can serve a broader social justice for universal access, because Professor Zhen was talking about equitable, resilient, accessible elements in the process of sustainable infrastructure. So if sustainable is our destination, equity must be our compass. So we have to look for equity that will lead to resilience, that will lead to sustainable economic development through infrastructure and other aspects of economy and social economic transformation. Professor, if you allow us, we'll take few questions, though we are running out of time. There are audiences in the auditorium. There are audiences maybe also in the link. If someone has a question from the audience, you may raise your hand, then the question can be asked. Anyone is interested to ask any question? I think there is one hand, if the microphone is given to. We'll take maximum 2 questions.
Anyone else? All right, if not, thank you, Zhang. I'm Dr. Zahid, and it's good to see someone from UCL. Actually, one of my previous teacher, Alan Ranwick, is in your constitutional unit. Please say my thanks to him. I was intrigued by 2 things, actually, from your presentation, which is the reference about the ethics and also about Singapore in the financing part. So as a political scientist, I was wondering about how do we have a measurement of ethics, ethical financing in sustainable infrastructure development. I was looking for if you have one. And the reason it also connects to Singapore is because my reading of political science sort of informs me. There has been a lot of buzz in recent time about this Singapore's financial sector of fueling the regime in Myanmar. And there is a UN report about banking on the death trades. And in 2023, I suppose, Singapore has cracked down on it, and some clean financing is now probably possible through Singapore banks, and it has shifted to Thailand. So now, does your study anywhere indicates this particular problem? Because whatever we are talking about, sustainability and other things, if we infuse ethical part of it, that is the money clean, the one that I'm using for building this beautiful infrastructure, has there been any benchmark in any of the studies through which on that clean money utilization for sustainable development? I know it is happening in the UK. You must be aware there is an institution, about 200 years institution called DODS, which does political intelligence, and its latest report is on the politics of project financing. It's a Westminster-sponsored study. One of my friends is working on that, and they have published the politics of project financing. So when you have these PPP projects and everything, do we really have any measurement metrics to find out where from the money is coming, and is it fueling the death trade or civil war or some kind of oppression by some regimes in somewhere or not? Thank you.
So thank you, the speaker. Sorry, I couldn't see very clearly. I think what you have shared is extremely important. Very insights that you point out. So globally, the financing system different very much, country by country. It depends on the sophistication of the capital market, but it's also, for example, in much part of the world that I work in, GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council countries, which is in the Middle East. They have a huge part of Islamic financing as well, because riba, the interest rate is not allowed. So I think when we are looking at this, the consensus globally is about ESG, environment, social, and governance. All this due diligence that different parties, when they work together, they have to conduct. And of course, the government in the process of building a consortium need to require the parties that join the consortium to have a clean sources of money that go into infrastructure. Now, when you get to the secondary market, such as Singapore, where it is financed, a lot of this is relying on the capital markets metrics, such as ESG. For example, you can look at S&P ESG, which is website. They would have to look at all these organizations in terms of the ESG compliance aspect. And these are provided in an informationally efficient capital market. And as you rightly point out, they will be civil society actors, which provide some sort of surveillance in terms of the issues of corruption or human rights abuses, etc. So I think to answer your question, this very much depends on how informationally efficient the capital market respond to this news. Now, for the equity side, generally this will impact the share price if it's risk finance. So Singapore using risk, and then of course, the ESG aspect will then affect the rating of the company. In the traditionally kind of Western-based debt financing system, because PPP, for example, you consortium based on risk allocation, and once you sign a contract, it's very difficult to change. So the only asset maybe is the bankruptcy of company due to its bad reputation, so I think it's very different country on country. But I think the requirement for information disclosure, monitoring on the capital market in terms of information, and from government in terms of running up a major infrastructure project, due diligence that they have to require. And of course, this should usually be multi-party finance. So World Bank and other international institutions, they will conduct their due diligence as well as domestic government that need to look into different party who came into this. And there should be a clear principle to apply in terms of understanding, if there's any ethical concern.
Thank you, Professor. As we are already delayed by 10-15 minutes, so I'm afraid I won't be able to take any further questions. I do also had few questions, but I think in the latter stage of discussing with you, we can discuss over those issues. But it's our heartfelt gratitude that from the other part of the world you have joined us. And we had a wonderful, insightful discussion and session with you on infrastructure, which is sustainable, leading to sustainable development with ethics and innovation. Thank you very much, Professor Zhen from the American International University and from the International Conference, ICCTASS 2025. Thank you so much. Next time, there's an invite for you to come and join us in person. Thank you very much. That's the end of Keynote Session 2. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Very happy to try and exchange with further insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yi, for that exceptionally thought-provoking keynote. And thank you, Dr. Sultana, for chairing the session. But I would request you to stay here for a little while. And in the meantime, I humbly request Professor Dr. ABM Siddiq Hussain, who is with us at this moment. Sir, please grace the stage for a moment to present Dr. Sultana with a plaque of appreciation. Sir. Thank you, Dr. Siddiq Hussain and Dr. Sultana for your efforts. And now, without any further delay, I think we can seamlessly transition into the plenary session 1, another hybrid session. And